So first I want to thank Sam for helping with the first part of the presentation and really leading up. It's nice to be in a full copper room. But we're in a new era. Things are changing the way that projects are advancing and the requirements of these metals. I think the world is just beginning to understand the importance when we talk about saving the planet and the energy transition and sustainable energy and electric vehicles. I think every day most people are starting to realize that copper is actually the real strategic metal. We talk about 20 times need in lithium, but we're only producing 100,000 tons of lithium today, and the grades of projects, of lithium projects, are very high. When we look at the copper space, the amount of investment that's required to meet the goals of the planet are astounding. And it was an excellent graph in Sam's presentation demonstrating the amount of investment that's required in copper. It dwarfs all other metals. But what does that mean for the strategy of developing projects as we move forward? And that's really what I want to focus on today. So first, obviously, a lot of forward-looking statements in the presentation, so everybody should do their due diligence. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, except for to point out this is from Goldman Sachs. This is several years ago that was talking about this opening up in this supply gap. And surprise, the last 2 years have actually been in deficit, or even earlier than we thought. We're actually, that the water's starting to heat up with that frog in the pan. But what is 8 million tons of copper by 2030? That's 7 years from today. It takes 18 years on average between a discovery to put a mine into production, and only 2 of 100 actually make it across that finish line. These are the 10 largest mines in the world. They produce 5.7 million tons of copper. That means that we have 7 years to build more than the biggest 10 mines in the world, and they do not exist. It's nice to see some high quality assets being presented today, but the list is very short. It is extremely short. I'm a mining engineer with 25 years working in the industry, and it's still daunting to think about what the requirement is in terms of copper. And the truth is, we are not going to make it. It's not going to happen. So all the copper companies, if I had an exceeding amount of money, I would be buying into every single one of the copper potential companies out there, because the world's going to need it. There's going to be a significant change that's going to happen. Those that have copper will make the rules. It's kind of an internal saying that we have. So that's what we look at. I'm not an exploration geologist. Thank goodness I have a wonderful one that works with me, with Matt Wonder. But we're looking for projects that have the potential to become game-changing potential mines. We're looking at assets that can be that over a billion-ton potential, et cetera, near service, all these criteria. And then when we look at a project, that is the way we check our boxes. We are not out there just to get drilling results to prop up. We're looking at checking boxes to demonstrate the projects can get into production. So we have a portfolio of projects, including in Argentina, Canada, and also Colombia, but my presentation is going to be focusing on Colombia today, our Makoa asset in Colombia. So first, I would like to explain that, or at least to qualify, that this is already a spectacular project that already has over 2 million tons of copper contained. It's one of the world's largest undeveloped resources of moly. We can see what's happening to moly price. And it's a project that's open in all directions. It's actually been drilled on very little, but already has a very core part of the resource that exists. It has an historical pre-feasibility study done in the 1980s. It's already qualified the project, and it only has lots of room to grow in terms of expansion and exploration opportunity. But our valuation is not obviously being based on that resource, and that has been our focus, is on how to de-risk this project and convince people why copper in Colombia is so critical. But before we get there, a real quick story about what's happening in moly. We've heard that term a few times today because I think that moly is the canary in the coal mine that is demonstrating what happens when we have this supply-demand pinch really going on, and it's playing out in front of us. Moly prices have doubled since the beginning of the year. And in terms of our project, the Makoa project, the existing resource, contains almost a world supply of moly. And was based on a $10 price is our resource calculation. I did it on the back of a napkin, but if we use today's copper and moly prices, the resource grade of Makoa would go up 45%. It has a huge impact on the project, but I don't think it's just going to be moly that this plays on out. I think we're going to see it playing out also in copper. So I really want to focus now then, why Colombia? The first is potential. On the map on the left-hand side, we see a straight line, and it's a straight line, and it's really three different events geologically in the subduction zone of the Andes Mountains. But there are 12 of the 20 largest mines in the world occur between Chile and Panama. We have Ecuador, where I previously worked, and I'll go into that a little bit more, where we have the Mirador project that is now today producing, and I think it has six different projects in development. But in that small space of the Jurassic belt that's been actually explored, you have Mirador, Pananza, San Carlos, and Warintza, and I assume that Ecuador will continue to find new discoveries. And Ecuador is on a very strong path to become one of the next largest producers of copper in the world. Between Chile and Peru, 45% of the world's copper is produced, mostly as concentrate, which is one of the parts of the problem. To put it into comparison, all OPEC countries produce around 30% of the world's oil. So to give it the concentration of the metal that is most important in driving the world's economies, you know, the term copper is the new oil, it puts it into perspective the importance of this in the world's supply chains. Thank goodness geology doesn't respect countries' borders, and right across on the other side in Colombia, Makoa, I think, is the proof of the potential that copper has in Colombia. And so that's the first step. The second step is understanding where Colombia is sitting. Today, 6% of the GDP is based on oil. Over 50% of the exports are based on oil and coal. The president of the country has taken a firm, aggressive stance towards moving towards the energy transition. But whether he does it or whether the world says we're just not going to be buying as much as we move forward, the economy of Colombia needs a new prime ministry. And they've thrown out the dice and they say, we're putting our bets onto the reindustrialization of the country. And that basis is going to be on strategic metals. And it makes sense. From a geopolitical standpoint, the world is changing, right? The war in Ukraine, the dominance of China in production chains, I think we've seen movements. And we've seen movements from the United States itself putting over $300 billion in credits between those materials that are produced from strategic metals from in the United States or from our allies. And lo and behold, Colombia is one of those key allies. It is a major non-NATO ally that's in the same level of Japan and Australia, and it has a free trade agreement. They qualify for this credit potential and the strategic metals, right? And Colombia itself has based their new strategy moving forward on the reindustrialization of the country. They've just submitted to Congress their four-year development plan, which includes as one of the pillars the reindustrialization of the country, starting production chains that start off from those raw materials such as copper. We can see on the left, it's all about the supply chain from Mr. Biden, and on the right, not a surprise, the president of Colombia saying, we need to mine more metals. And most people don't know that part of the story because they hear the oil story, they hear the coal story, but they don't understand this big push towards advancing strategic metals. And these are some of the quotes within just the last few months and a significant change in the dialogue on the importance between the president, ministers, et cetera. My favorite is by the Vice Minister of Mines, who said there was a storm in Colombia, but it's going to be followed up with a massive amount of copper. And that is the focus of the country today, is how to use that copper in order to reindustrialize the country. So we look at the map of what does Colombia have in the short term in terms of copper production. It has one producing mine, which is a VMS called El Roble, which is exporting about 8,000 tons of copper concentrate per year. And it's got three additional projects that actually have resources associated to them. Unfortunately, one of those has an offtake agreement where that concentrate is going to be going to China. One is sitting in an area that's pretty much not going to be advanced. So really the only project left, and probably the biggest in terms of scale potential, is the Makoa project. And it doesn't have a destination yet for that copper production. So the question is, do we produce it in country? In accordance with, that's what the country wants. And it makes sense. We saw those graphs. The countries and those locations that have the copper production are going to make the rules, and that is where the value is. If a kilo of copper is worth $10, an electric motor is worth $100. And you can secure that financing off the back of those assets. And that is the strategy that Colombia is using, that the Makoa asset will attract the investment required to bring in the money into the country. It underpins their strategic plan. And then walking back, how do we put this all together? And again, I previously was Senior Vice President and Country Manager for Corriente Resources, where I took the Mirador project all the way through to the start of construction and subsequent sale, was on board for a year afterwards, and that now went on to become the first large-scale industrial mine in the history of Ecuador. A director of ours, Ernie Mass, did the exact same thing in Cobre Panama. So the first two industrial projects in those two countries, and taking all those lessons learned, it's all about, the simplest form is it's about this triangle. Real relationships locally, real strength locally, reputation nationally, that drives political will. And so that's the pieces that we've been putting into place. We signed the first participation and inclusion agreement with our local community. That is the first in the history of the country that says we are going to co-plan this project. The first one we did is an access road that goes all the way to the mining camp that will release the need for helicopters. And we did it together. They said, okay, this will help us go and put in a road that also accesses our sugarcane. And this would be great. And I'll put it there because that area it's really slide and muddy and the donkeys can't walk. And we planned this together. And we're executing on that. On a national level, we are part of the leadership. I live in Colombia myself. I've done multiple interviews, national television. We are part of that dialogue and help guiding Colombia through this transition. And about being part of that political will. And we put together, Colombia right now has submitted a national strategic plan. It's announced its reindustrialization plan. It's about to announce its just energy transition plan. And at the request of the government, we've put together one of the sub-plans, which is how to create a copper-based production chain in Colombia. We've submitted it to the government. We continue to be in discussions, and our goal is to make that a process that we work together with the government of Colombia to advance this. Use the Makoa project to attract the investment necessary to make that shift, and that is where we are today. Another advantage the project has, as you can see from the map, it's right off the national highway system. It's 5 kilometers from the electrical interconnection between Colombia and Ecuador. And then at the same time, there's nobody living in the deposit area. There's no requirement to make any movements of anybody in the area. So from an infrastructure point of view, and from and still near to the close city of Makoa, which is about 50,000 people, has access to skilled workers. So from that point of view, it's also a significant checkbox for the government. And combine all that, we're working on a plan that completely, or from a large aspect, de-risks the asset and shows a clear pathway on how to take this project into production, put together with the Colombian government. That is one of the key catalysts that we see is going to make a massive difference and create a massive amount of value for our shareholders. But the other one is, through the subsequent exploration on this project, it will continue to put out significant drilling results. So we can see these two things combining to create a significant catalyst for the project, a clear pathway to move forward, and also through the future exploration work on the project. As you can see from the graph, there's only a very small area of this project that has actually been drilled. This is a combination of some geophysics works, geological mapping, and also geochemistry we've done to date. We've mapped out where the porphyries can be seen on surface, and most recently, the lithocap of the actual project, and a very large identified demagnetized zone that's an indication of mineralization. And we have over 5 different porphyry center target, potential porphyry center targets in the area. That we feel that this project is only in its infancy, and it demonstrates it can put out key results. One of the things we wanted to do was confirm some of the historical workings. We put one hole into the project, which was over 1,300 meters of mineralized from top to bottom. And when it was released, I think it was May of last year, it was one of the 12 best holes in the world, and it was only one drill hole. The rest of those projects are only 3 different companies that I, at least previously, had about $1 billion market valuation. So this is the strategy, a major strategy of the company: become a part of that direction that a country is taking, create a clear pathway that shows how we're going to take this project into production, combined with a significant news flow of drilling results. So that is it.